In 1863, a man was discovered near death along the rocky shores of Nova Scotia. His legs had been removed with surgical precision and he wouldn't respond to any questions. For decades, he remained silent, cared for by strangers until his passing in 1912. Today, we explore the identity of the man nicknamed Jerome of Sandy Cove. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to another episode of Red Web, the podcast all about unsolved mysteries, true crime, and the unknown. I am your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins, and joining me hearing this case for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
That's a hook. That is a hook, if I've ever heard of one. Washed up on shore already. How'd you survive that? I thought you were going to say the person was dead. They're alive.
They're alive.
They lived a long life in which they said nothing. And then the very mysterious and unfortunate thing, both legs surgically removed.
Yeah.
If both of my legs were surgically removed, I'd probably be upset, frustrated, lots of emotions, but also screaming about whoever did it from the rooftops. You would be so annoyed about me talking about who did it.
Yeah.
Man, I just can't even. I'm very curious. I'm very curious to see where this road leads, because there's so many questions.
Oh, yeah. And this case is filled and rife with questions. It's a historical mystery, like I said, from the 1800s. It reminds me so much of one of our big cases that we covered almost 4 years ago now, the Tamam Shud case, aka the Somerton Man, the mysterious man found on an Australian beach in 1948. We did a whole episode on that case if you want to check it out, Task Force. But again, we have even earlier than that, like 80 years prior, somebody on the rocky shores in the cold Nova Scotia coast. And yeah, the scene is mysterious. But again, I don't know. I have a caveat that I want to dive into for this one because it is a factual case. We have a point A where it all starts. We have a point B where it all ends. But how we get there depends on the source. So many things kind of conflict. There's almost like multiple timelines, and much of Jerome's story is from oral history. I'm going to share so many of the details that we can, the core details that are true throughout most of these sources. But of course, I'm going to highlight some of the key differences where I think it matters. Though if I changed and shared every micro iteration of this tale, it would get very, very confusing. So suffice to say, it is a mysterious story. And it is true. This man existed. I have photos of him, so I can share them with you at the end.
So we have just enough to confirm that he existed in reality. But
yes,
we're talking 1800s, man. We've done some cases that are not even 10 years old, and we don't have the photo evidence or the text files or the phone records. And it's just like, what? Let alone trying to grab something from the 1800s where there is a non-existent digital footprint.
Absolutely. You're totally right. And in the case we love to reference where a skull was transported through the mail by investigators and then lost, that was a more modern case too. And I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, listen, do you need a courier to take a skull across the nation? Maybe not. But like, what, did they just put a stamp on the skull and hope it worked?
I mean, I feel like you'd put a bunch of, you know what I mean? You got like a special stamp or something.
Yeah.
It's like police force or whatever the heck. You know what I mean?
Right.
Special
right.
stamp. Boom. Throw it on there. And then it's like, okay, priority. This thing is something. Got to be careful. Lost.
Right. Nowadays, I'd be chucking like 15 air tags in the skull's mouth and then say, all right, I'm not losing you.
Yeah. See, that's the way to do it. And also, I feel like it probably fell into the right hands, which was the wrong hands. Because if it fell into like, I don't know, our hands, we'd be freaked out, return to sender type situation.
Right.
If someone was to open that and keep that, I don't know, where they sell stuff on the black market.
What you do? You get a...
They like a collector, like the weird, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You get a box and you go, I don't know who sent this to me, but thank you. And now that skull's sat on someone's shelf.
But what a get, you know what I mean? Like, no, I would not keep that. So that in itself is interesting.
Yeah, it was a wild case. But before we dive in, a few things I want to talk about. This week, exclusively at redwebpod.com, we have Movie Club for Caveat. It's a Shudder exclusive. It's in the Oddity universe that Fredo covered a few months ago. It is a really fun indie horror. So even if you haven't seen it, we break down the whole plot, give our opinions. It was a really fun movie that comes out this Friday. And then also, Fredo, as you know, our 5-year anniversary is coming up. So tomorrow, July 1st, and exclusively for the entire month of July only, just July, we are launching our year 5 anniversary founders merch at store.redwebpod.com. So come pick yours up. We got a shirt, a hat, a hoodie, a couple things like that.
It's big. Is this year's big drop? You know, wear it, grab it, strut it down on the Met Gala. All right, it's the hottest fashion of the year. And no, we didn't go overly baggy. I refuse to believe that the modern day men's fashion is not just a flash in the pan where all the guys are wearing these baggy pants. Task Force, we're not wearing baggy pants. We're not going back to it. We're not doing skinny jeans. We're not wearing these parachute pants. Okay? Anyways.
Dude, that's middle school right there.
Please pick up your Founders merch for the year.
Yeah, come pick up the merch for the year, and then battle it out, you know? Let us know, are you the baggy pants or are you the skinny jeans? Because for some reason, there's no in between. There's no, okay, we're not talking boot cut, athletic cut. It is polarized. We got parachute pants.
Or nut huggers.
So yeah, come over to store.redwebpod.com. Task Force members at Elite and above do get 15% off. So if you want to come and get a little bit of your Patreon support money back, come get a code and then support us that way. And also mark your calendars. We are doing a huge stream on July 18th to celebrate 5 years. It is a Friday, July 18th at 2 p.m. Central Time. We're going for 13 hours. We have a lot of gameplays coming. We're doing a big kind of Patreon subathon. We have stretch goals for you guys because we're trying to see if we can expand this Red Web universe. We have a lot of show ideas we'd like to expand into and need your support to do
let
that.
us entertain you for 13 hours and help us meet some stretch goals, and you'll see some cool things in the works.
Yeah. As we get closer, we'll tease more as to what those stretch goals are, as well as what is involved in that stream. But come hang out with all 4 of us, Christian, Fredo, Jillian, and myself. We're going to have a great time as we head into the weekend, and we end at the witching hour, which I feel like is perfect. We might get haunted on stream. I don't know. All right. With that said, like I said, there's a lot of twists and turns in this mystery. I'll highlight the differences as I see fit because, again, it gets very confusing, and the sources, they're not put down on paper for so many decades. So it gets wild, but it's a true case. And as we begin, Fredo, I want you to take a look at this photo as I set the scene for the task force. On September 8th, 1863, 2 fishermen noticed a man sitting against a rock on the shores of Sandy Cove. This is a community in Digby on the Digby Neck of Nova Scotia.
I was stuck on the word Nova Scotia. I don't know why. That just lingered in my brain. I was like, Nova Scotia. I was like, I don't even know. Is it cold? I think it's cold.
It's definitely cold. While you take a look at that, I'm going to sip some knowledge out of my sippy cup of knowledge.
Ooh, the sippy cup. Mine is downstairs. I got to clean it.
Mine's holding ice that I put into it like 16 years ago. So that's how far back the prototype went. Okay, so you're looking at Jerome's Rock.
Yeah, this looks like a cold sandy shore. It's a giant rock, tons of big pieces of log and probably like seaweed, little sticks. Very sandy.
Very sandy, absolutely.
But that's, Jerome's Rock on the beach at Sandy Cove, where the mysterious stranger was found.
So let me paint a picture for you, because I threw a lot of locations out to you, and I want to really visualize what we're talking about. So the Digby Neck is a very long, thin peninsula that sticks out from the southwest end of Nova Scotia, which itself is an island and Canadian province on the eastern coast. If you're American, it's right off the northeastern coast of Maine. But yeah, it is a very long, sandy bar that kind of comes out. It's just wide enough for a road to go down the middle and a few villages to be along it.
Oh, okay.
And as far as the discovery, another version of this story features young fishermen that saw this man from a window while searching for something else. This young fisherman then gathered others for help, but the most detailed start to this story is with 8-year-old George Colin Albright, who discovered this man. Either way, he was kind of stumbled into by accident as he's sitting here silently on the shores. So the morning was very rainy and cold, and regardless of who found him, they approached and realized that this person was a young man, about 19 years old, described to have flaxen hair and blue eyes that just stared out into the ocean. Flaxen being kind of yellowy, blonde. And around him on the sandy shores has been described a few things, but consistently bread and a jug. I've also heard a pitcher of water and some cookies, but a few things to keep him going. Now, of course, the man appeared very cold and was seemingly succumbing to the elements. He had a numb expression on his face, with one source saying that he appeared stupefied. Other versions of the story claim that this man was audibly in pain, as you kind of indicated you would be, Fredo, and others still say that he was actually fully unconscious when he was discovered. So you can see now how we're getting into completely different trajectories on this story.
Here we go, man. Everyone's an author, a New York Times bestseller. They've got to have their damn spin on the story. It's like, just tell it how it is. Was he in pain? Was he unconscious? Well, actually, he was doing a backflip off of the rock. And it's like, don't stop. Don't.
Right. He was hovering off the land. His eyes were glowing.
It's not what it was. Don't put your own spices into the cooking pot. Just let the mystery be the mystery.
Right. It's compelling enough as itself.
Right.
A mysterious man that doesn't speak shown up on shore is already compelling. So, regardless of the scene, when whoever discovered him looked down, they noticed that both of his legs were missing just above the knee, with several layers of bandages at that kind of knee end. Through all the different stories, it's unclear exactly what the man was wearing, but two details remain consistent. His outfit was navy in color, and it appeared to have a high quality about it. Whether it be the fabric or the stitching, it appeared that it wasn't just something cobbled together, that it was a formal outfit in some way. From here, the discovery party, either the fisherman or the young boy George Albright, brought him to the nearby village. Where exactly they brought him has been debated, but in the iteration where George finds him, it is said that the man was taken to his home, the Albright family home. So up until this point, the man seemed barely cognizant, though he was certainly alive. Even after he had warmed up, the man remained silent, not speaking to anybody who attempted to ask him any questions. After recovering in the warmth, the stranger was brought to see a doctor about his legs. The doctor noted that the amputations appeared to have been recent and that they were performed by someone with surgical skill, because it was a clean cut all the way through. It wasn't like an accident or a violent shearing or anything. And I say that because this might come up in some of the theories as to who this person was or where they originated from.
Right. And I'm assuming that, you measure how clean the cut is by how clean the tear was of the skin tissue, the tendons, the muscle, the bone, as opposed to, if it was ripped off or, there'd be jagged pieces of flesh or even flesh hanging out or stuff like that. It's probably like very, very cleanly done, very precise.
Yeah. I would imagine so. Yeah. Maybe something to do with like contained bleeding. The bandages were relatively fresh, and so that's how the doctor knew that this was something recent. But yeah, if like, as you're saying, if the muscle and tendons and bone especially have a clean cut to them, you can kind of tell if the bone was sawed versus broken. Obviously a clean cut versus a sharded end. But that's essentially what the doctor is identifying here. So I know that there's not a lot of twists and turns yet, but just to give you a really fast, high-level recap, a young man in high-quality Navy clothes was discovered almost by accident and brought to town to see the doctor. Both legs were surgically amputated just above the knee sometime recently, and he looked as if he had seen a ghost, but otherwise he was healthy, and he wasn't talking to anybody. So the village people now are very curious. Who is this stranger? We've never seen him before. He's washed up on the shore, and he's not talking. Who is this person, and where might he have come from? And that's where they begin to theorize, and they remember seeing a ship a half-mile off of shore just the day prior. So the day before he showed up, there was a ship very close to shore. Now, it wasn't unusual for schooners to be going up and down this inner bay. So the peninsula is very skinny. There's a small bay to the south of it and a much larger bay to the mainland north of it. And so there are shipping channels, there's trade happening, but this one was quite close to shore. And a schooner, by the way, is just a kind of a ship with two masts, has rigging, has sails.
Okay.
And they noticed, or at least a few people noticed, depending on the iteration, right? That this ship was passing back and forth shortly before the mysterious man's arrival. Again, very close to shore. Interestingly, there is another more recent description of these events with a lot more detail. So let me share that one. It says that a man named Robert Bishop and William Eldridge were working somewhere nearby, kind of up on the hills of the peninsula, when they saw two schooners, not just one, but two, heading into the shore at Sandy Cove. Before they were able to lose sight kind of over the crest of the hill, they noticed that one of these schooners released a smaller boat, kind of like a landing boat that would go then actually to shore. This is where they lost sight, and so they don't know what happened after that. And the story itself has two different angles, one saying it was the day before, one saying that it was several days prior, sometime in August, so at least 8 or 9 days prior. And that then led up to the discovery of this mysterious man, and people are kind of putting two dots together to say maybe this was his arrival or his maroonment, somebody kind of leaving him behind.
Yeah. You're stuck here, you've crossed us in some way or whatnot.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. We're not thinking like a search party, but I guess they didn't like jump on shore.
Yeah, I mean, it whatever happened, it seems that they didn't make contact with anybody. And so really the only thing we know is like, regardless of the truest report, right? These ships passed by, someone showed up, and that's that. So we'll talk more about his mysterious arrival and the identity, like I said, in the theories in just a bit, who maybe was on these schooners, their point of origin. Again, we don't have names necessarily to identify who Jerome of Sandy Shore was, but we do have some clues that might hone us into a location.
Okay.
So at this point, the man is in the village. He's kind of healing up. He's getting better. And the story continues that the man was taken in by the local group known as the Overseers of the Poor, which is a group that helped support the impoverished in the area. And it's said that he stayed at different homes for some unknown periods of time, essentially bouncing from home to home as each of them volunteered to support and help feed and house this individual. Still, he did not speak. He would mutter, he would growl, he would grunt noises sometimes, but no one was sure what language he was trying to speak, leaving locals to believe that he couldn't understand any of the languages that they had tried.
The question in my head is, do we know that he's capable of speaking, right?
That's a very good question.
Because right now it seems like noises and maybe just different types of guttural sounds, but not necessarily an actual word. Even if it's in a different language, you know, if someone came up to me and started speaking, even in a different language, I'd be like, okay, this is a language I don't understand. As opposed to, they're making noises, they're hissing at me or something. You know?
Right. Absolutely. That is one of the theories, and I'll just go ahead and talk about it now because there isn't much else to say about it. But it could be that this mysterious individual, and I'll get to the origin of his name Jerome in a second, but that this Jerome of Sandy Cove might have been mute. There are some theories as to why that might be. There are many real life reasons for that to be, but again, it would all be speculation, and so I don't really want to speculate on that. So it is possible that he was mute and that he either couldn't understand and or communicate back. So it's entirely viable.
True. But then my next level, I guess, question is like, what is his literacy level? Because then, you know, to write something down, all that kind of, you know what I mean? You could write some stuff down. Or maybe they could like point to stuff. So that's why I was very, very curious as to see. It's like, oh, he did not communicate and we got nothing from him. I'm like, here's a globe. I'm going to spin it. You stop it. Whatever. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that.
What looks familiar?
Yeah.
Your gut instinct is right on, because the next bullet I have in my notes is that he didn't write. And we don't know if he couldn't read or write. It's just that we know that he didn't seem to write in response as communication. He didn't speak in response to communication. And so at the time, there's a lot of kind of theorizing that, okay, maybe it's that he doesn't understand the languages. And so they're thinking he doesn't understand French, Italian, Spanish, Latin, perhaps English. And but you're right. I think your gut instinct is completely viable. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the theories, but there's also an angle that attempts to answer why he couldn't communicate in a different direction as well.
This episode of Red Web is sponsored by HelloFresh. Make your summer both enjoyable and delicious by getting the #1 meal kit as voted by USA Today's readers, HelloFresh. HelloFresh makes it easier to fit quick, home-cooked meals into your schedule every week by curating delicious recipes right to your door, as well as over 100 seasonal snacks, sides, and treats. Every HelloFresh meal uses high-quality ingredients, including seasonal, fresh produce, proteins that travel from the farm to your doorstep, and are simple with easy-to-follow recipe cards or simple heat 'em and eat 'em options. Choose from 60 recipes every week, including prep and bake and ready-made meals, and over 100 market items to add on to breakfast, lunch, and more. I love HelloFresh meals. One of my favorite recipes I've had is the chicken and apple rosemary pan sauce with mashed potatoes and roasted Brussels sprouts. It is so good. And I cannot wait to get some more recipes so I can keep eating that good food. Make your summer enjoyable and delicious by signing up for HelloFresh at hellofresh.com/redweb10fm and get 10 free meals with a free item for life. That's hellofresh.com/redweb10fm for 10 free meals and a free item in every box. hellofresh.com/redweb10fm. One per box with an active subscription. Free meals are applied as a discount on the first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan.
So ultimately, yes, people are lining up to see this mysterious man, try to ask him questions. I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting frustrated out of it, especially if he can communicate, but he simply doesn't understand all of these languages. He's just feeling like alone, almost like he's a man in a zoo because people are just trying to see who this guy is.
That's what he would be at this point in time. Yep.
And at some point, okay, we don't know when, but apparently he muttered something, and locals believed it sounded like the name Jerome, and so therefore he became known as Jerome of Sandy Cove.
See, I'd be afraid that I'd just mutter something really dumb. You know what I mean? Like, you got labeled this now because people are like, I interpreted that you muttered Jerome. If I'm just like, pee-pee, and they're like, what?
You're like, I'm trying to look for the restroom, and you become known as PP of Sandy Cove.
Yeah, the PP of Sandy Cove. I'm like, no, I don't. Yeah. Then that's why I started talking. I'm like, no. I can talk.
You break your silence.
It's not PP. My name's not PP. We're not putting that in the articles.
Whoa, PP can talk.
Yeah. Where are you from, PP?
PP, tell us where you're from. You speak. I feel like for me, I definitely would have I'm kind of clumsy. I would have banged my toe on something and would have been like, ow, Eich. And they're like, oh, it's ouch. His name is Eich.
Eich.
Or something silly, you make some weird noise when you bang your toe.
Yeah.
The name Jerome does play kind of into some of the theories, kind of into some of the linguistics.
Interesting. Okay.
Again, you have to remember we're in the 1860s. There's a lot of biases happening as far as what their assessment of him is psychologically, but also their world is only so big. And so they only know of so many languages. And so they're really trying to force a lot of what they hear from him through the lens of, oh, maybe it's Italian. Yeah, let's look at Italian, right?
Yep.
To the point where they're even trying to size him up. They're just, all right. They say, and I'll kind of quote the people at the time through the long oral history, but they think he looks, air quotes, Mediterranean, right? They're looking at him and they're basing this based on appearance, but they keep thinking, I don't know, he looks, as we think, Italian. Okay. And therefore, this is where the story starts to evolve. But that's why they really hone in on the Italian language. Mm-hmm. But either way, I thought there was something really interesting here. Because they assumed he was Italian, they believed that he might not share the locals' religious beliefs, and maybe that's why he was silent. Maybe he was just uncomfortable with the difference in culture or religious aspects. So from here, he was sent to Meteghan in 1864, sometime in the year prior, which was an Acadian community across that narrow bay. So some crash course history that I'm honestly not even very familiar with. The Acadians were French settlers that established colonies in the area during the 17th century, maintaining the French language as well as the Catholic faith. So this was a faith majorly shared by the Italians, especially at this time. I believe the locals were Protestant. So they're thinking, okay, let's send him to Meteghan. Maybe he'll be more comfortable over there. Maybe he'll start to speak again, or what have you. So at this point, he's now across the bay in another place, and he moves in with a person named Jean Nicholas, who themselves spoke Italian, French, English, as well as Russian. Now, 6 years go by. It's 1870. Nicholas then moved, and Jerome himself was moved to yet another home, this time with Didier Como and the Como family, along with his wife, the 4 children, and they're all in St. Alphonse. There he spent the majority of his time simply staring out the window, sitting in the sunlight during the summers and sitting by the stove in the winters. Honestly, a life I would love to retire to someday. That seems chill.
That's what I'm saying. It sounds peaceful as hell. As of right now, I'm happy for him because I don't know what he's done in his past.
Right.
You know what
Without
I mean?
knowing all the context, that sounds peaceful.
That sounds
and I'm happy.
Good on you. Congratulations.
Yeah. So reportedly, he got along well with the children, who sometimes brought him gifts like candy. And many people heard stories of Jerome of Sandy Cove, again, like I said, and stopped by to try to see him, try to get him to talk. This was a frequent occurrence because the Como house actually doubled as a stagecoach shop, and so people coming by was not an infrequent thing. The family reportedly charged an admission fee. Okay, I forgot about this when I said that he was kind of becoming a zoo, but they literally charged an admission fee to see Jerome. We're treating the man like a freak show now, and I'm not here for it.
Yeah, weird. Very weird. I guess the trade-off is that he has a place to stay and it's peaceful.
I suppose so, And they're like, well, he doesn't seem to complain.
And at that point, he just sits there and he's just being quiet.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because there's a ton of people thinking that they're the ones that are going to be the one to get him to talk and open up. And it's like, okay, I can fix him.
Yeah. Maybe he'll talk to me.
Yeah.
Because there was actually the story of one man who spoke 5 different languages, and bless these people from history that know all these languages.
Seriously.
It's wild. But he knew 5 different languages, and so he's thinking, maybe I can get him to speak. Maybe there's something he will understand. But again, Jerome did not respond to any of these languages or any of his questions. So at this point, many were wondering, was he intentionally ignoring all the questions, or did he truly not understand any of these major languages, which would only add to the mystery surrounding his origins, because these are a lot of global languages. Of course, there are many other languages in the world, but it just adds more questions. Who is he? Where does he stem from? And this opaque cloud of misunderstanding, it just prevents you from getting to know him at all. And so it just maintains the mystery, adds to the desire to spread this word of mouth. And to your question, it's also valid that he might not be able to understand or communicate himself.
Yes.
Now, on top of that, we'll dig more into this line of thinking, into the theories, but I wanted to expand on it here as well. There's some modern speculation that this man may have actually been from Sicily, in which case he would have been a man alone among many. Sicilian was essentially non-existent outside of Sicily at the time, especially in Nova Scotia, but it might indicate why he had an appearance that might look Italian, or maybe had a language that sounded Italian. But again, we'll talk more about the nuance with that angle soon. Now, despite his quiet nature, some claim that Jerome spoke to them in secret, or often at night.
Okay.
Again, this is speculation.
See, those are the ones that are like, I was the special one. He spoke to me.
Right.
What do you say?
Oh,
Okay, I'm not going to share it with you.
He's so poetic.
Mhm.
He speaks in beautiful soliloquies like Shakespeare,
Soliloquies.
but only to me.
Yeah, just to
we,
me.
We have our own language.
Under the moonlight.
Yeah,
Like-
literally at night.
Come on.
Yeah. There's no way to confirm the accounts, but part of me wants to romanticize this and think that it's true.
Oh, most definitely. Maybe he found one person that he really connected with and spoke to that person. That's a beautiful story.
That's a very beautiful story. Jerome under the starlight. That's what I'm going to call him. All right, so I have 3 images now that are all photographs of Jerome. We're going to kind of cycle through these in no particular order. In the 1860s, photography wasn't so widely available. These are all from the latter end of his life. I'll walk up to that very year, but I want to conclude the backstory of Jerome, as he lived quite a long life after he was discovered. So feel free to peruse these images. Task Force will kind of parse through these 3 and cycle them as I share these last notes. But according to a local newspaper, Yarmouth Times, Jerome was so-called exhibited in Yarmouth in July of 1899. This would be 36 years after his arrival. Then in 1902, the family moved into a larger house. Again, he's still living with the Como family. At this point, I do want to say, they have 9 more children. They've got 13 children in that household.
Jesus.
I'm just like, that's a lot of mouths to feed.
13.
So now in this bigger house, it's a new home. Jerome was given his own room in which he spent the last 10 years of his life. Jerome then died, we can assume peacefully, on April 15th, 1912, leaving us with an undying question. Who was Jerome of Sandy Cove? And as the stories say, these three images that we've been looking at stem from, I believe, specifically 1912. So these are pictures of Jerome in his twilight days. And as he is sitting next to either, it looks like a stove or a piano, but yeah, always looking down, hands in his lap, kind of peaceful or in thought or something.
Yeah, he's just, this is an old age. Bald, got some hair around the crown, thick stash.
Yep.
But just looks very peaceful, man.
Yeah.
It looks like he's, I don't know, like it's not stoic. It's like he's just deep in thought or reflecting on life. He looks like he has something very, very profound to say in these photos, but a man of no words.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. He does look like as soon as he speaks, it will be something profound. And maybe then he just he doesn't even pass away. He just fades into stardust.
Right.
I'm really building him up into being...
Yeah, this ethereal being.
Yeah. But I just think there's something so interesting, so deeply fascinating about his story. And like I said, there's this cloud that we'll never be able to pierce through, obviously because time is kind of locked. But even at the time, no one was able to pierce that veil of communication. And so there's just some elements that we will truly never know about this man. But everything that we do know, all the facts, aside from the meandering twists and turns, he winds up on shore. He had at least some food to live for some amount of time. A pitcher of water or a jug of something. We don't know for a fact. His legs are missing, but surgically, it raises a lot of questions. It gives you a lot of speculative ideas. And I'm curious where your mind's at as we head now into the theories. We'll start with his nationality. We'll start with maybe what might have happened to lead to this situation. And then we'll end with some very speculative, specific angles on who he might have been as an identity.
I think, to me, and I think no matter which way I go, I just have this romanticized story made up in my head. And to me, he's a man that probably has sinned or done something really bad and feels like they must atone for that sin and are self-punishing to make up for that. They never felt like they were able to.
That's a very interesting angle. I mean, we don't know if he's religious. We don't know if that is a religious kind of response, but maybe there is some sort of atonement, whether it be religious, whether it be culturally, or what his job was prior to this. That's a very interesting angle. And I do think elements of that will play in some of the theories. But yeah, that could answer for the silence as well. So let's talk about the potential nationality. There's two angles here, one of which I kind of lightly touched into, but let's dive in. Jerome's nationality was a constant curiosity, especially since identifying this key piece of information may have opened the door to better communication with him, maybe breaching the understanding and getting a response kind of realm, but also potentially his identity, reaching back home to see if anyone knew of somebody missing, etc. So, as we discussed, many people believed that Jerome was Italian. When he did vocalize sounds, people believed that he was making noise that sounded similar to various Italian words, though I have to believe that some of that might be biased just based on appearances.
Yeah.
But it's possible that these were just random mumblings, right? But some of these words were actually written down and documented. Three of them we have here. One was Trieste, or in French, I want to say Trieste, but it's Trieste, which is an Italian city. You have the word fretto was apparently mentioned, which is the Italian word for hurry. I believe all of these words, by the way, are also Sicilian, just to say that. And then Colombo, that was another word that was mentioned, and people believe that that might have been the name of the ship that he was on.
That makes sense during those times.
Many people put this all together. At least these three words, again, they're going off breadcrumbs, and so they're trying to build a story out of it. And so they're thinking, okay, maybe he arrived here on a ship named Colombo from the city of Trieste, and I don't know how the word hurry comes into play. Maybe they hurried over here or hurried to leave and he was left behind. That's all speculative. So even if they were right about his country of origin, there's some information that only serves to rob this mystery of any potential clarity. So in 1863, the year the man was found, Italy did not have a unified language. Instead, they had a series of regional dialects, including Latin, Ligurian or Genoese, Sicilian French, Sardinian, Corsican, among others, in addition to Italian. Forgive me if I mispronounced any of these, but again, I didn't even know this. I think Italy had just been unified at that time, but they still had regional dialects all over the place, and so it wasn't a universal Italian language by this point. As such, he may very well have been from Italy, but where specifically and who he was likely lost in translation over the century plus ago. So now I'm stuck imagining somebody stranded on an island with the loss recently of their legs and few things to eat and survive off of. They're probably knowing that they're going to be lost, that they're going to pass, and no one around you knows their language when you're finally found. And so whoever this person was, they may have just truly been alone, feeling abandoned, feeling like they saw the light at the end of the tunnel only to be rescued. And so now they're just alive with this, I have to imagine, a very dark memory, assuming this is all accurate, right?
Right.
Just a dark presence of like, I was abandoned and I am just alone. That's harsh.
It's not easy to think about, to go through. But I do feel like as decades go by, you start to talk again, you start to open up, you start to say, like, you know what I mean? Something physically or mentally is blocking that ability there.
I think so. And that will play heavily into the next theory, which attempts to answer why the communication was just not possible. But before we get into that, there is an interesting small theory on the nationality. There's not a lot to substantiate this. I did a lot of research to try to identify this person, do some research on. We do have one name that is speculation as to who this person might have been. So let's just crash into it. So aside from the theory that he was Italian, some believe that Jerome might have been American or Irish based on the assumption that he was Caucasian. In fact, there were two women with the last name Mahoney who visited Jerome and believed that he might have been their brother, Jeremiah Mahoney, who had run away from Alabama. According to author Rosemary Bachman, one of the Como sons actually believed that the Mahoneys shared an awful close resemblance to this Jerome of Sandy Cove, and so that's not really something to go off of entirely, but they believe that they look similar enough that they could have been siblings. The women actually seemingly gave Jerome a sealed letter, which Jerome supposedly tore to pieces without opening it or reading it. And so does that add weight to this theory? Does it rob the theory of validity? Who knows? But if this was Jeremiah Mahoney who ran away and the sisters found him, maybe there's some sort of tension. He's like, I don't want to be found.
Because they wrote a letter, right? They didn't actually go physically visit.
No, they were there.
Oh, okay. That's what I'm thinking. Like, I'd be like, that's my brother. He might not want to talk to me or see me. And this might be the last time that I see this person, but that's my brother. You know what I mean? I know who that is. Hello. Hi. They could be lying or whatever. And then Jerome's not really in a place to defend himself, living in this silence, in this kind of self-isolation. But still, if that was my friend, someone I knew, I'd be like, I know this person, this is their name, this is their information, this is how I know them. So for them to be like, well, yeah, we think that's him when they saw him, like, I don't know,
Him tearing up the letter to me is almost like his way of saying, I don't know who these people are, off with this letter. But there's another angle that says, oh, he ran off because there was some sort of tension, and so him tearing up that letter is exposing that tension. I don't know. I'm trying to look into Jeremiah Mahoney. I don't see any record of somebody who went missing or ran away. Again, you're not going to have every record of every missing person, especially if they run off, but there really isn't much else to say about that particular angle.
I just feel like the siblings would just be like, that's my brother. This is the information about him. Here we go.
Well, I wouldn't even know. They didn't say why he ran away. They also don't answer as to why he isn't responding. And so I don't know. Something isn't feeling gut check right.
Right. I feel like it's a giant puzzle, and the easiest parts of the puzzles are always the corners, and we don't get the corners out of this. You know what I mean?
Getting the corners or the edge pieces.
Yeah, or the edge pieces.
We just have a bunch of solid blue pieces. We don't know what to do with them.
And I'm like, this is the easiest pieces that you should have here.
This episode of Red Web is sponsored by BetterHelp. People today face immense pressure from all areas of life. So it's no wonder that millions of people in the US suffer from mental health issues like depression every year, and it's often undiagnosed. It's okay to struggle. Strength comes from opening up about what you're experiencing and talking about it with somebody, like a therapist. Therapy is a wonderful, wonderful tool. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself, and BetterHelp can help you find the right therapist for you. With over 35,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. And it's convenient. You can join a session with a therapist at the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. Plus, you can switch therapists at any time. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/redweb. That's betterhelp.com/redweb.
All right. So we've explored the nationality. I think there's a lot of interesting thoughts in that. Again, a lot of it based on speculation. But another common theory, instead of addressing who he was, attempted to address why he wasn't speaking. And one of those is that instead of choosing not to talk, as your gut instinct kind of said, Fredo, Jerome might have physically been unable to speak because he was mute and or suffered from some sort of brain injury. To support this claim, some point to the fact that he did not respond with noise or even facial reactions when things were shown to him, right? He did communicate sometimes with grunts or some sort of guttural sounds, but people would oftentimes try to get a rise out of him by maybe showing him things. For one instance, right? He was shown a gun and he was completely stoic, didn't react, didn't express, didn't make a noise, nothing whatsoever. Furthermore, Jerome's caretakers had to change his clothes. They were even washing him, which does seem to indicate that there's more than just a stoic man behind the eyes. It does seem to indicate that there's something else more cerebral happening that we can't possibly know now. We can only speculate on. In addition to this, it's possible that Jerome was hard of hearing. So maybe that's why he didn't respond to people when he was spoken to. But it's really hard to say. To conclude this theory, some believe it's possible that Jerome suffered an accident that resulted in a traumatic brain injury and possibly resulted in injured legs. This would answer for a few things, for example, the recently amputated legs, as well as his difficulty in communication. TBI can certainly lead to communication problems. Continuing with this line of thinking, perhaps whoever he was sailing with determined his injuries were too much of a burden and maybe left him along the coast before sailing out to sea, leaving him with some food, some water, just enough to keep him alive until hopefully someone found him. But again, we're building a story out of breadcrumbs,
yes, we are.
But it connects some dots, so I can see why it's a prominent theory. Okay, so now as we move on, we're moving away from the breadcrumbs and going now into the whispers of a single crumb, right? We're living in speculation territory.
Oh, man.
And I feel like the first two theories tried to pull together as much as possible from air quotes evidence, but now we're getting into the territory of just like, what's possible?
Yeah, what are the different tales that kind of line up and that we can tell?
Yeah, like let's pull on a thread and just see how far it goes. With that, they're a little bit more interesting because there's a little bit more flair and cartoon to them, but let's dive in. So there are some theories that exist that Jerome ended up at Sandy Cove because of his career. Makes sense so far. Some thought that he had been a high-ranking member of the Navy or a nobleman of some kind because of the nice clothes that he wore. Some say that, again, we're missing those details. We know it's Navy, we know it's high quality, but some are saying that's actually a uniform that he was wearing at the time. It was also said that his hands were too soft to indicate manual labor. That is, he had no calluses on his hands, so he would have had probably more of a leadership position, so to speak. Many have tried to build on this theory to make sense of his abandonment, saying things that he was maybe he betrayed his family or betrayed somebody in the royal court and was therefore banished. Others say that he might have been a spy of some sort, that he deserted his post and therefore he was mutinied here on the shore of Sandy Cove. Again, there's not much else to say about that. It's got a lot of flair to it. It's interesting, but not much else to say on that. Now, before we get to one that I think is a little bit more interesting, I'll do one more kind of smaller one. Some people believe that Jerome might have been a pirate of some kind. Similar school of thought, but as the theory goes, he may have lost the lower part of his legs as some form of extreme punishment before then being thrown overboard. However, again, I referenced the doctor who believed that these amputations were done by a professional and they weren't really just hacked off with some sword or anything like that. And so, beyond explaining the amputations and the arrival on the island, this theory lacks any real evidence. I'm thinking like mutiny. If he's thrown overboard, how did he end up with a jug of water and some bread, maybe some cookies?
Yeah, I mean, you also, in terms of like amputation of his legs, the pirate ship could have had someone that was skilled, maybe someone that was a former
That's
surgeon,
true.
And, ran away from that life or something like that. Here I go, like romanticizing this whole story, but
yeah,
I don't know what life he would have to live for him to choose to be silent, but I don't know if pirate quite fits it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like rebellious, and it just seems like kind and his own thoughts. That's not what a typical personality that you'd find at a pirate ship.
Right. And what comes to mind with these clean cuts, if it's a surgical removal, you could like surgically punish somebody, but it seems that something happened, right? That he had like some sort of infection or some sort of horribly broken foot, or both feet. And so therefore amputation was the answer. And the fact that he's on the shore with at least some meager rations means to me that this isn't necessarily a punishment, but it's the result of something. I mean, pirates certainly mutinied people and marooned them on islands, sometimes with, sometimes without food. But that's kind of where it leads me to this last theory that has a little bit more detail to it. According to local historian Fraser Mooney Jr., a few years before Jerome appeared in Digby Neck, there was a foreign man working 117 miles north, or 188 kilometers away, at Chipman, New Brunswick. So this would have been north across the bigger bay, kind of more onto the mainland, and a completely different person. Now, this worker reportedly fell into a frozen river in 1859, which would have been about 4 or 5 years prior to Jerome showing up, and falling in that river ultimately led to gangrene, which then is like an infection of the legs and therefore the loss of those limbs. So as this story goes, he was called Gamby because he would often wake up calling out gamba, which is Italian for leg. So he's basically waking up calling out, "Oh, my legs," because both had been removed. And apparently someone, this is as the story goes, someone paid a local schooner captain to take Gamby away from Chipman. Which means someone took money to take him, only to then maroon him not too far away on the inner side of a peninsula. He would have had to come around, maybe go up and down the coast, as the story says, before finding a village and dropping him off here, and then leaving him with minimal supplies to maybe keep him alive for a little bit. This theory is speculative.
Yeah, it is.
And it's been called speculative by Canadian author and journalist Noah Richler. But again, without a lot of details, it does attempt to close some gaps. We don't even know if this person actually existed, this Gamby individual, but it certainly is a very intricate way to solve for who Jerome was.
Yeah, it's a very creative way for sure. But we're in that territory, right? There's not enough for us here to fact check. We just know of his existence, his long existence. And he didn't give us anything during this existence. That's like, good for him, I guess. You know what I mean? He's like, no, I'm giving no one nothing. I'm going to live out my days the way I want to.
It's very interesting. And that theory, as we always see, sometimes they're more interesting than reality will allow them because there's no evidence for it. But yeah, it's interesting. It creates an even more intricate story for who Jerome was. But either way, man, we have an individual who ended up on shore. However he got there will forever remain a mystery. Whoever he was, again, forever a mystery, because the fact that he didn't communicate or couldn't communicate only adds more intrigue. And so this has been the story of Jerome of Sandy Cove.
Oh my God.
So many more questions than answers, but again, it's like a movie.
It really is. It really is. I could see this being a film, and the connection between like Jerome and the people over the years that come and go on this little peninsula. That's a film right there.
Yeah.
But like, to say nothing, like, he's gone through a lot. The man has a lot of feelings and emotions in that head that are just rattling around, and to say nothing is, I don't have that kind of willpower, but Jerome did.
He lived for 49 years after being found. That's a majority of his life. And I think it was estimated that he passed somewhere in his 70s. So he would have been a young man when he was discovered. Right. Like, yeah, 19 when he was discovered.
Yeah.
So like,
That's
wild.
That is wild. That is wild. I mean, think about like where you are now compared to where you were when you're 19. For some of you guys are like, I'm 17. I'm like, never mind. You're not there yet. Yeah. Like when you're 25, you're mid 20s going like, oh man, 19 was a different me. Then you hit 30 and you go, whoa, 25 was a different me. 19, who is I don't even know that person. And so like to go through all those changes as a young adult and to say nothing, like, what happened?
Right. To me, that says whatever. I'm not even going to speculate on detail. It says either something emotionally or physically traumatizing happened, or from birth, he might have just been mute and was unable to communicate. But either way, he still wound up on the shore. He has injuries that are mysterious. There are, mundane explanations, accidents, infections, and things. But again, it's all those details that we as humans are naturally attracted to and want to find. But it's been a fascinating walk through Jerome's life, whatever his real name might have been. But as we come to an end, as always, I want to shout out some task force members. Our newest member, as of like right now, Calidus Fox, thank you for joining the task force at redwebpod.com. We hope you enjoy. Mark Anderson, who is a buff scientist, love the rippling mind muscle. And then, of course, our squonks to shout out today. We got Clint from PS3 and Andy Schrock, just to name a few. You guys, redwebpod.com, our Patreon page, is the number one way to support us. It is what keeps us financially going.
Yes, it does.
It is literally why this podcast is able to be on air and how we're able to have these really interesting conversations with you guys and have this this wonderful community and speculate even further on theories over in our Discord. But yeah, Fredo, lots of things to thank them with, exclusives over at the Patreon.
Tons of different benefits, shows, behind the scenes stuff, all that.
Yeah. Ad free. We got shows coming. We got that big stream once again, July 18th, 2 p.m. Central Time. So mark your calendars. We want to make sure it's got some window for everybody around the world. We have task force all over the world. And so we want everyone to be able to tune in at some point. And the whole goal there is to try to bolster our community and be able to cross some thresholds, some goals to try to pilot some new shows and expand the Red Web universe. More details on that as the week approaches. Founders merch out now, store.redwebpod.com. Lots of things to talk about. But with that said, Fredo, I'll see you right back here next Monday for yet another mystery.